So good evening and welcome to the Catskill Regional Invasive Species Partnership virtual webinar. It's identifying trailside invasives and reporting in IMAP invasives. I'm John Thompson, the Catskill Regional Invasive Species Partnership Coordinator. And tonight we'll be reviewing what invasive species are, how to identify trailside invasives that you might see along the trail. In the second part of our program, we'll focus on setting up an account and using iMap invasives to record where you're seeing invasive species in the field. Unfortunately, my colleague Alexa Tamburello, our volunteer and outreach coordinator, who was planning to join us tonight, has had a family emergency, and she won't be joining us tonight. So I'd just like to say that I wish the best to Alexa and her family, and hopefully you'll get to meet her down the road. She's planning on doing the next program. This is the first of a two-part series, and the second presentation will be held on September 4th at 6 p.m. I'll enter the registration information link in the chat, but I think that will be led by Dan Snyder-Nerp and Alexa Tamburello. Dan Snyder-Nerp is our terrestrial invasive species coordinator for CRISP. So I'll put a link to that in the chat and you could register tonight so you'll have it on your calendar and be ready to go in September when we do it. That program will focus on managing invasive species and will be a continuation of the discussion of the plants that we'll talk about here. And as I mentioned earlier, if everyone could introduce yourself in the chat, maybe your name, where you're from, and whether you have an iMap invasives account, that might be helpful for me to know when we get to that portion of the program. And if you wanted to download iMap invasives and load it onto your smartphone, you could do that while we're talking and getting started. And we'll be going over that when we get to the second part of the program. Just wanted to remind you to please remember to mute yourselves as feedback and background noise interferes with me and other people who might be speaking. And closed caption is available at the bottom of your screen. You can hover over the dots at the bottom of your screen and click more, and you should see the CC available. I can get my slides going. So, like I said, tonight we'll be going over what an invasive species is, common trailside invasives, how to identify them, and then when you see them on the trail, how to report them through iMap invasives. We'll go through setting up an account and how you can take observations through the iMap invasives app, or you could do it online. So the first thing that I want to cover is just what is an invasive species. In New York State Environmental Conservation Law, Title 17, Article 9 of 2008 defines an invasive species as having two attributes. And the first is that it's not native to an ecosystem. And the second is that it causes harm, and that harm is to the economy, human health, or the environment. So a couple invasives that you might think of are the Asian longhorn beetle, which has been eradicated from New York City, but is still on Long Island. And then another invasive, this one we actually do have in CRISP. This is the northern snakehead, which came into the upper Delaware River a few years ago in 2020. So we're talking about invasives because they're a threat, as I mentioned. They're one of the greatest threats to New York's biodiversity and threaten many of the aspects of our human well-being because they contribute to habitat degradation and loss, decreased water quality, the loss of native fish, wildlife, and plants, the loss of recreational opportunities and tourism income, and they could cause crop and forest damage. We'll actually see a forest disease that's causing damage tonight. Some of the biological characteristics of invasive species are they have fast growth, rapid reproduction. Sometimes they'll have a high germination rate. Um, Sometimes they'll exhibit what's called phenotypic plasticity, where they can change their characters to be able to, say, leaf out earlier as we get warmer springs, or hold their leaves later into the fall as we get warmer falls. And often uh, invasive species are environmental generalists, meaning that they can live and thrive in a lot of different environments, wet or dry soils, um, hot conditions, dry conditions, whatever. So New York State, in recognizing the threat of invasive species, established 8 partnerships for regional invasive species management in New York State. You can see each of the 8 on the map on the right side of the slide, and you can see where CRISP is. It's outlined in darker green there, and our mission is to promote education, prevention, early detection, and control of invasive species to limit their impact on the ecosystems and economies of the Catskills. So that's what we're doing. And CRISP itself includes me, the director of CRISP. As I mentioned, Dan Snyder-Nerp, he's the terrestrial invasive species manager for CRISP. Sarah Coney is the aquatics invasive species manager, and Alexa Tumbarello is our volunteer and outreach coordinator. The CRISP region itself uh, is over 7 counties. It's all of Otsego County, all of Schoharie County, all of Delaware County, most of Greene, Ulster, and Sullivan counties, and a little bit of Orange County down in the lower part of CRISP, the southern part. It's about 3.3 million acres. And some of the major landowners that we have in CRISP are DEC, who owns over and manages over 400,000 acres, and the New York City Department of Environmental Protection that owns another and manages another 154,720 acres. So those 2 landowners and land managers are really important in what we're doing to CRISP, and we do a lot of things with both the DEC and the DEP.
Who had started to say she was actually on board and previously
I'm sorry, I'm hearing some feedback from somebody and I can't. There, okay. Sorry, I can't see everybody at once. So this curve here shows what happens when you get an invasive species, and we show this often because it helps to define what we do at CRISP, which I think is important. And you could also, this curve is scalable. You could use it pretty much any scale. It may be from the CRISP regional scale, as I mentioned, all the way down to a county scale, to a town scale, or even a property scale. So if you start on the left-hand part of this graph, you'll see that with the blue arrow at the bottom, you get an introduction of an invasive species. And the 2 vertical axes are the area infested, and that's going to increase without management for any invasive species that you get under the right conditions. And also the control costs would increase corresponding to that. When you first get an invasive species, then you lost the opportunity for prevention. So prevention is a really important part of invasive species management. If you can control or stop an invasive species from moving into an area, then you could be effective in managing that area against this invasive species. But if you do get an introduction, then it's really important that you identify it very early so that you can manage it and eradicate it. Now, an issue, if you can see the little black arrow there, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor or not, but public awareness typically begins after an invasive species has been around for a little bit. So it's when somebody notices something different and they might report it through IMAP invasives or otherwise to us or DC. And as you can see, this arrow is out of the first couple boxes. You missed the opportunity for prevention and eradication, and you're in the box of containment. And maybe your invasive species goes even further than that before people recognize it. We do a lot of trainings to try to get people to recognize invasive species and report them, and also to manage the more established invasive species, which those are the ones that are in the box that's furthest to the right. Uh, your management options are the titles of each of these boxes: prevention, eradication, containment. Once you get to the box furthest to the right, it's resource protection and long-term management, meaning that if you have a really important area, something that might be really ecologically valuable, a rare species habitat, you you could remove invasive species to try to prevent them from impacting your rare species, for instance, but you probably won't be able to have the resources to manage that invasive species over a wider area. So you need to pick your battles, be feasible with your goals of managing that invasive species if it's really widespread. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some plants tonight. So just wanted to bring up a few botanical terms. I'm not expecting anybody to be a botanist here, but um, just wanted to point out some terminology that I might use just so that you are aware of what it means. So with branching and leafing out of plants, often we'll refer to plants as being alternate or opposite. Alternate means that you have a leaf come out on this side, you have a leaf come out a little bit higher on the other side of the plant, or the branching will occur in the same way. And then opposite branching is when you have the branches come out exactly opposite of each other, or the leaves come out opposite of each other. And the leaves themselves, we're going to describe as being simple, meaning that the base of the leaf is here. That's with the buds coming out, and or a leaf could be compound, where it has a number of leaflets, something like tree of heaven, sumac, um, and the bud is down here, and you could have a number of leaflets coming out of the leaf. So we're going to jump into our first species here, and we're going to start out with a disease, beech leaf disease. Charlie has been really gracious to contribute a lot of beech leaf disease records in the Catskills where he's been hiking the trails. Beech leaf disease itself was first found in Ohio in 2014, and they found that it's a nematode that's involved. And also there's 3 or 4 species of bacteria, species of fungus that's associated with the nematode. On the left side of this screen, the slide, you can see some microscopic photos of nematodes. They're very small. They're within the cells of beech leaves. So the beech that we have in the Catskills is called American beech, and we'll talk about that in a second. But what the nematode does is it causes some discoloration. We'll talk about what that looks like in a minute. Eventually, the leaf will start to curl up. Then you'll see parts of it start to brown. And just so that you're aware, we'll step back a second and we'll talk about American beech. That's the native beech that we have in the Catskills. This disease could also impact non-native beeches like European beech, anything that's in the Fagus genus. So it's something to look for, not just in the natural environments, but maybe at an arboretum, street trees. You could find this disease on other species of beech. So American beech itself, it has relatively long leaves. They're alternate, as I referring to the terminology we talked about earlier. They're simple, and they're deciduous, meaning it drops its leaves. The leaves are 2.5 to 5 inches long, and they have these prominent teeth along the margins of them. And the bark is really interesting, unique, in that it's really smooth, looks like elephant skin when it's healthy, but uh, it does become blocky with another disease that beech gets called beech bark disease, and that breaks up the bark, makes it really blocky. So back to beech leaf disease then. Uh, what you see when you have kind of a mild infestation of it is a light banding on the left hand of this slide. That will get heavier with an increase in the disease, and then with higher severity of the disease, it causes a chlorosis, necrosis, puckering, and curling. So the light banding on the left is just banding between the veins of the leaves themselves, and that's what we mostly have seen in the Catskills. But I'll show you some photos of the really high severity beech leaf disease that we have seen in some parts of the Catskills. So as I mentioned, beech leaf disease started in the Midwest. Um, in 2014, moved into New York by 2018. Then it has spread, kind of skipped and hopped through a lot of New York State, but it was in the last few years that we've seen it move through a lot of the Catskills region. It was 2022 when we first saw it in Sullivan County. Then it's moved through uh, a lot of our region, which I'll show you a more detailed map of that in a few minutes. So like I said, the first symptoms of beech leaf disease that you would see would be this banding, and this is a darkness between the veins of the leaves. Uh, then you get, with more severity of the disease, you get a leaf puckering, curling, chlorosis, and actually the trees will start shedding their leaves. So you might see trees that are defoliated. Um, you get deformed leaves, curling, puckering, uh, chlorosis, which is a yellowing of the leaves, or necrosis, which is a browning of the leaves. And like I said, when it gets really high severity, then the trees will start to shed their leaves. So I wanted to show you this because beech leaf disease is really expanding in our region. Um, and I'm hoping that people will be out there looking up at the canopy, looking at leaves as they hike by, and trying to take good pictures of these of the species and this disease. The best way to do that is from photos from below the leaves. So you stand maybe at the trunk of the tree and you're taking a picture looking up from underneath the leaves with some backlighting so that then you can see the banding to pick out the light severity. If you're doing this through iMap Invasives, that's awesome because you'll already have the location. I'll get notified when you submit a record. But if you're just doing it on your own, if you don't have an iMap Invasives account or don't feel comfortable with doing a record through iMap Invasives, then you could still take a picture. Just note your location, the number of trees that you looked at, the number of trees showing symptoms. Um, yeah, like I said, take a good clear photos of the symptoms, and this is going to be something I'm going to bring up when we talk about IMAP invasives. It's really important when you're looking at an invasive plant, you want to make a record of it, to take good photos of the characters that you need so that somebody can verify your record. Also, I'll mention with beech leaf disease, negative data is good data. So if you're walking through a stand of beech trees in the Catskills and you don't see beech leaf disease, then that's really good data to have because we would know that there isn't beech leaf disease there yet. And it could be really important if beech leaf disease does move in to an area to know it wasn't there last year, but now it's there this year. Um, so as I mentioned, beech leaf disease first came into Crisp and Sullivan County in 2022. It spread throughout most of Crisp, and uh, as of this morning, only Schoharie County didn't have uh, beech leaf disease out of all the 7 counties in Crisp. So um, this is a screenshot of IMAP invasives. The orange dots and the pink dots are showing IMAP invasives records. I also had the iNaturalist records turned on so you can see some red diamonds of iNaturalist records. So I'm going to show for the plants that we go through, I'm going to show why it's invasive, why each of the plants that we're talking about are invasive, how to identify each of these plants, and also where we have records for them in CRISP. So each time we go through a plant, then it's going to be generally in that order. So these are some pictures near White Lake and actually the Toronto Reservoir near White Lake, where you can see that uh, I hope you can see. It's hard to tell. Maybe in the right-hand photo, it's a little bit clearer that these are beech trees. There are some, they have sparse leaves. They've dropped a lot of leaves. The leaves looking up at them on the left side of this slide, you can see they're kind of curled up. So there's a whole neighborhood where all of the trees are infected, all the beech trees are infected with beech leaf disease, and I expect we're going to see more of this given time through to the Catskills. So it's important that we record where beech leaf disease is now. Um, and like I said, negative data where it isn't. And then um, we're trying to understand there's a number of people throughout the state, throughout the East that are trying to understand how beech leaf disease spreads and what we can potentially do about it to stop the spread or treat the trees uh, once they're infected. So we'll go on to our first plant. It's called in iMap Invasives Oriental Bittersweet. And this is a vine that chokes out trees, it shades out other plants. The birds eat the berries and they don't get the nutrition that they get from the fruits of native plants. This species spreads by seeds and roots. It can do what's called layering. It will climb up over shrubs and then touch the soil again, reroot, send out another stem. And it also impacts our native species by hybridizing with our Native American bittersweet. As I mentioned, it's a woody vine. This is native to Eastern Asia, and it was introduced in the 1860s as an ornamental. Um, it Besides the impacts I mentioned before, it can also weigh down the canopy of forest trees, leading to breakage and uprooting of forest trees. So it'll start to kind of break down the structure of a forest over time. Oh, I see Tammy has a question. Um, does the beech leaf disease nematode infect the trunk as well, or just the leaves once a tree is infected and loses its leaves in the winter? Is it possible for it to not be infected the next year? It actually infects the buds. Um, so you do see that trees, once they get it, that they are infected in subsequent years. Um, and then trees can die. I might not have mentioned, but trees can die from this disease. The younger trees, the smaller trees are the ones that will die, could die within a few years. It takes a longer period of time for full-grown trees, mature trees. And they think that because we have this beech bark disease in combination with beech leaf disease, that may be leading to our trees dying more quickly than they found in Ohio, where they originally discovered this. So thanks for the question, Tammy. And if anybody has any other questions, uh, please feel free to enter them in the chat as we go. Also, I'll leave some time for some questions at the end of this section before we jump into iMap invasives. So back to identifying bittersweet, it has glossy, thick, round, alternate leaves, and they often have a little tip at the end of them called a drip tip. The roots are orange colored, and the berries along the vines are green to yellow, orange, red. You'll often see these, people collect them around the holidays. They use them in wreaths. Another way that this could be spread is by people collecting it, dropping the fruits in other places. Then just to show American bittersweet, which I rarely see it anymore, it it has yellow berries when they're ripe. The berries are in terminal clusters. Bring up um, the difference. So the American bittersweet is going to be on the end of a twig. The Oriental bittersweet will be coming out kind of along the twig where the leaves are coming out. Uh, and the Oriental bittersweet has these roundish leaves with that drip tip versus the more narrow arrow-shaped leaves of the American bittersweet. These are kind of some lookalikes of other vines that you might see out there. Of course, poison ivy is common. It's a native species. Virginia creeper, it has 5 leaflets. That's a common species that you might see out there. And then there's a number of different species of grapes. Some of them are native, some of them are non-native, but they have this really shreddy bark. So they they are you can differentiate them from the Oriental bittersweet based on what their bark looks like. Of course, their leaves are trilobed, things like that. So Oriental bittersweet is pretty widespread in our region. I think most of these maps, if you look at them really closely, you'll see that we have a lot of invasive species along Route 28. Some of the campgrounds have invasive species, and uh, the the records that we have for IMAP invasives, I would say, are mostly based on the work that we're doing, where we're working, um, and they're not necessarily the full distribution of these species. So that's why I'm really interested in working with you folks as you're hiking the trails. If you can make records of species that you're seeing, we know that there's a lot of invasive species at lower elevations, but as you get higher to higher elevations, we don't have good records of the invasive species. So all the records that you can contribute would be really valuable. And through iMaps, this is how we know what's out there. So if people don't make a record of something, then we don't know about it. Excuse me. Um, so the next species we'll go on to is Japanese barberry. It's native to Japan and Eastern Asia. Hmm, Excuse me. It was introduced from Russia as an ornamental in 1875 to Boston. So there's really particular detailed records about that. It forms dense thickets that shade the ground, and these dense thickets um, provide habitat for white-footed mice and other rodents. And also the shrubs themselves They hold in humidity so that the relative humidity under these thickets provides good conditions for ticks. So the combination of Japanese barberry, white-footed mice, and ticks leads to more Lyme disease. So having more Japanese barberry could lead to more Lyme disease. So it's another reason not to like Japanese barberry. These species leaf out earlier and retain their leaves longer than native shrubs. Uh, I should mention too that these invasives that we're going to talk about, they are there are interactions between them. A lot of areas where we've seen emerald ash borer killing the ash trees, you have some Japanese barberry, and that has expanded to become more dense, more widespread, more vigorous plants with the opening of the forest canopy. And so you end up with getting more Japanese barberry, and we've seen that in a number of areas in the Catskills. So barberry itself, Japanese barberry, is a compact shrub with dense branching. It has single sharp spines, as shown in the lower right hand photo here. It has small oval to alternate leaves, as shown in the upper right photo, that come out in kind of these swirls. Um, and if you look at the lower left photo, I took a picture of um, the roots here, and they're turmeric colored, really bright yellow. So if you're digging them up, it's really obvious when you have a Japanese barberry. And it also has these red berries that persist through the winter. Um, Not a lot of species seem to eat them, so they seem to persist. And often you'll see in the winter the leaves have dropped, but it will still have the fruits on the stems. So Japanese barberry, it's one of the most well documented, I guess you could say, IMAP invasive plants that we have. Again, we're looking at the confirmed records here in green. The pink are the not confirmed records. The little diamonds are the iNaturalist records. So there's a lot of records of Japanese barberry here in the Catskills and throughout the Catskills. But like I said, at higher elevations, we don't have a lot of records of IMAP invasives. So as you're doing hiking and going up some of these mountains, it would be great to record some of the higher elevations that you might be seeing um, Japanese barberry and some of these other shrubs. So our next species I'm going to talk about is Moreau's honeysuckle. There's a number of these bush honeysuckles that we'll get to in a minute, but this one is the most common. It's native to Japan. It was introduced as an ornamental in the mid 1700s. It forms large stands that outcompete native plants. Its berries are eaten by birds and mammals, but they don't have the nutritional value of native berries. That's something common in some of these species that we're talking about tonight. And it leaves out earlier and retains its leaves longer than native shrubs, as we also mentioned for the barberry. So these shrubs are up to 10 feet tall or so. It has opposite leaves and twigs, and the twigs have some hairiness on them or pubescence. If you cut open the stem, as in the lower left-hand picture here, its pith of the twig is hollow and brown, and it has these white flowers in the spring which fade to yellow, and then the fruits are really bright orange to red, as you can see in the upper right photo. Then there's other species of honeysuckle. You can in IMAP invasives just say that it was bush honeysuckle SP if you don't know what it is. And management of these bush honeysuckles is really similar. It's the same. So if we're managing for them, then it's not really going to matter whether it's a Morose honeysuckle or a Tartarian honeysuckle, or the hybrid is called Bell's honeysuckle. So with all these invasive honeysuckles, the pith is going to be hollow and brown, and then the bark is going to have these thin vertical strips that will be gray to brown. And then Tartarian has glabrous or smooth twigs and leaves. It doesn't have hairs on them, white to pink flowers, and the fruit could be red and occasionally orange or yellow. Then the Bell's honeysuckle, it has, like I mentioned, intermediate characteristics between Morose and Tartarian. It usually has um, smooth twigs and leaves. And then if you look in the photo to the upper right here, on the left is Murrow's honeysuckle, in the middle is Bell's honeysuckle, the leaf and flowers, and then to the right is the leaf and flowers of Tartarian honeysuckle. Like I said, Murrow's is most abundant, but you could run into Tartarian or even Bell's. But you may not be able to differentiate them, so just putting them in the bush honeysuckle category in IMAP invasives would be great. So this is all the bush honeysuckles together. You can see that they're like along 28. They encircle the Panther Mountain at lower elevations. There's a lot over by the Pacton Reservoir. Um, we don't have a lot of bush honeysuckle records. I'm sure it's underreported, and it'd be great to get more records. The next shrub that we're going to move on to is autumn olive. It's native to Asia. It was introduced as an ornamental in 1830. It forms really large stands that outcompete native plants, and this plant itself has been shown to have some allelopathy, or it produces kind of natural herbicides that can inhibit the growth of other plants, along with it has the ability to fix nitrogen, so it can really change the soils. And the berries eaten by birds and mammals don't have the nutritional value of native berries. It's kind of empty calories, and some people I've heard refer to it as autumn olive garden because you're not getting the nutrition that you need, but the the birds and mammals might still be eating it. So autumn olive you can recognize because the leaves are, and this is really prominent, the leaves are silvery underneath, um, and the leaves also have smooth margins. The twigs are red to orange, and the mature trunks might have it, they might be gray and have thorns. It flowers in the spring with white, pale yellow flowers, and its fruit is red, but it has little silvery specks or scales on them. This is what the distribution of autumn olive looks like in the Catskills. All these screenshots that I've shown from iMap invasives are kind of zoomed in to the blue line to give you a kind of a larger scale of the Catskills themselves, without the whole crisp region involved. So you could get a sense of with this species specifically, there's a few along Route 28 that are recorded. There's a lot, it looks like, around Kenneth Wilson State Park. And then outside of there, it's kind of hit or miss. There's a few clusters, but there's a lot out there. There's a lot more that we could be recording for autumn olive. Moving on to another species, our next species is multiflora rose. It's native to Eastern Asia. It was introduced as an ornamental rootstock for roses in 1866, and it forms really dense monoculture thickets that invade pastures and outcompete native species. Its plant produce 1 million seeds per year. Each plant can produce that many, and the seeds can remain viable in the soil for 10 to 20 years. It also spreads by layering when the branch tips touch the ground. So it's a species, once it gets established, then it's really hard to get rid of. You're gonna notice it in the field because, especially if you're bushwhacking, I know from experience, it's got really big thorns on the older mature stems, and it starts out kind of lightly woody. Maybe you might think of it as being herbaceous, and becomes more woody with time. And it could be a shrub that grows 15 feet tall, and it has alternate compound leaves with 5 to 11 leaflets. And the character of this one, and this is what you need to pay attention to, is the base of those leaves. Um, it has these what are called fringe petioles. So you'll see this little fringe along the base of these leaves, and this is the whole leaf here in the upper right photo. Um, then the flowers, they bloom in the late spring, really fragrant. A lot of people like the smell of multiflora rose, and then those flowers develop into rose hips, which are red for this plant. Oh, one thing that you could um, that I should mention about the flowers is it has multiple flowers on each stem, where our native roses would have one flower, and they would be colors other than white. So multiflora rose, again, this might be the most widely reported species in CRISP. We have a lot of records of it. I'd be more interested in um, records outside of lower elevations. Tammy has another question. Does it take a while for the fringe petioles to appear in the spring? I saw some early leaflets that didn't have them initially and then had them later in the season. It does to some degree. If the leaves aren't fully developed, Tammy, then it doesn't have that fringe petiole. So it's a character that is really important, but I have noticed that really early in the spring you might not see that character, so it might be something that you would need to come back if you're out there too early um, to look for that specific character. So that's a good question. Our next species that we'll move along to is border privet. I think this species is really underreported. It's native to Japan. It was introduced as a hedge in 1860. It forms a really dense shrub layer that crowds out native species. It blocks sunlight from herbaceous species and degrades habitat for wildlife. The mature plants produce hundreds of fruits per year, and wildlife, especially birds, will eat the fruits and disperse the seeds. And that's what um, as we've been going through these shrubs. That's really common for a lot of these invasive shrubs. So the leaves themselves are opposite, and they're dark green, and they're kind of oval shaped, and about 3 inches long. Um, and the twigs and the midribs of the leaves have a little hairiness to them. That's what pubescence means. The white flowers are terminal clusters on the tip of the twigs, and they smell foul, it said. And the fruits are blackberries, so you often see those on the end of the twigs. So it's a more common species that you would see closer to human habitation. We do have some kind of sparse records out into um, kind of the western part or central and western parts of the Catskills. But like I said, I think it's really underreported. You could report border privet, or if you're not sure which type of privet it might be, then you could say in IMAP invasives, it's some species of privet. Um, our next species, I think the last one that we're going to talk about is Japanese stiltgrass. So this is a herbaceous species, a type of grass. It grows really densely and outcompetes native herbaceous plants. Um, it it likes well it likes moist or what are called mesic soils in both sun and shade. Um, and its seeds could be viable in the soil for 5 to 8 years. So once it gets established, then you have to manage it for a long time to exhaust the seed bank of this plant. So you can see how dense it grows in the right-hand photo that I took here. You can also see it through the winter. The plants will be, each grass plant for stilt grass will be several feet tall, and you'll see it'll flop over other vegetation, down trees, things like that. And you can notice it even in the winter, when the leaves are off the other trees, that this yellow stuff, all of this yellow stuff here are stems of Japanese stilt grass, which is an annual grass. So it reproduces from seed, as I mentioned, but those seeds can remain viable in the soil for 5 to 8 years. So to identify it, it's referred to as a weakly erect annual grass. So you can see that it has it kind of has these weak stems, and you can see that it's really shallowly rooted in the upper right hand photo here. It has stilt-like roots. It's really easy to pull up if you want to take a look at it. The leaves are 1 to 3 inches long. They're asymmetrical, meaning that one side of the edge of the leaf is going to be kind of bulge out and further away from the midrib, then the other side will be more flat. And it has a silvery midrib on the leaf that you'll notice on both the back side of the leaf, as in the lower left-hand photo, and in the middle photo here on the upper part of the leaf. You can see that silver midrib. So that's characteristic of this plant. It grows really densely, and you can see that when you grab a hold of one and pull it out, that it has horizontal leaves. The leaves taper evenly at both ends. It's got a lime green color to it. It flowers in late August to September, so if you're managing it, you would want to manage it before it flowers and seeds. Um, and it will turn purplish in the late autumn. So you can look for it throughout the season, and that it'll, it's an annual plant, as I said. So really early in the season, you might not notice it. Then you'll start to see the little blades coming up, and they're not symmetrical in shape, and then it becomes more and more prominent over time. That if you're not sure what it is, then if you're coming out in June or July, August especially, then you'll see that the plants are fully developed and mature. So it's really easy to spot, and it grows really densely. So you'll see patches of it, especially in moister areas, like along where there might be a spring, or wetter soils. So you can see, again, in this plant, there's a lot of it in the kind of central eastern Catskills, and then we don't have many records of it in the central western Catskills or the northern part of the Catskills and the up towards the Blackhead Mountains. So we, when we're out in the field, or out taking a hike, um, we could contribute to the spread of invasive species if we're tracking in mud from one site to another. That mud might have seeds in it. So it's important to use boot brush stations if they are at the trailheads, and we're working. The Catskill Center has a grant from DEC to establish 20 boot brush stations at DEC trailheads throughout the Catskills. That's something that Alexa, who, like I said, couldn't be here tonight, but she's working on with volunteers to build these boot brush stations, so that when you come to a trailhead, you could clean your boots. When you're leaving a trail, you could clean your boots so that you're not moving mud or debris from one site to another. So it's important to clean the soil and seeds from your boots and gear, and also from your pets. You can use uh, these They have handheld boot brushes, like in the center photo here, that are available from NASMA, or you could use any type of brush to get some of that mud off of the treads of your boots or the top of your boots. So I'm gonna pause a second, and if anybody has any questions, you could either enter them in the chat, or I'll you could unmute yourself if you'd like.
John, I was just going to say that it's sometimes if you have a question about ID, I found it helpful to use Seek iNaturalist.
Yes. So one downfall, or I guess one challenge, I should say, of IMAP invasives is that you need to know what plant you're looking at, basically, or you need to have some idea or species that you're looking at. So Seek is really helpful. I use that a lot in the field. Sometimes um, with me, a lot of times I might not know exactly what a plant is, but I know it's like one of three species, two or three species. So Seek will help me to figure out which one it is. So Seek is an app that's associated with iNaturalist. So if you are interested in plants, then I would recommend, and you haven't downloaded it, I would recommend installing that app on your phone. It's really helpful. Is
Thanks,
that what
Charlie. That
you
was
found,
helpful
Charlie?
because
Yeah, thank you.
Oh,
that was
Claudia?
great. Because yeah, I was going to say there's something that I was recently in Vermont and New Hampshire. It wasn't there yet, but there's something down in lower Westchester, upper Fairfield County that's taking over neighborhoods. It drives me insane. It wasn't one of the vines you showed, although it looks a bit like some of them. And I was going to
Okay.
say, can I send you pictures, which I put in the chat, but I
Yes.
guess I can look up Seek.
Yeah, or you can send us pictures. That would be great.
Okay,
I'd
thanks.
I'd be happy if anybody um has any questions. I'd be happy to help answer them as to plant ID or any invasive species ID. Definitely. Thanks, Claudia.
Yeah, thank you.
Other questions? Oops. I can't see everybody, so if anybody is I don't see many people on video, but I don't hear anything. So we'll move on to the next section is introduction to IMAP invasives. Um, if you do have questions, then especially with this section, as we're going through this, so the point of this is that if you haven't downloaded IMAP invasives, you can do that. We'll talk about how to do that, and you can set up an account while we're talking. And then if you have trouble, if you have questions as you're going along, enter it in the chat, and I'll I'll monitor the chat to see if we have anything come up. And then I'll leave some time at the end for questions that you might have about things that come up that we're going to talk about with IMAP invasives. So IMAP invasives itself is a really important database that we refer to within the CRISP region. All of the partnerships for regional invasive species management use it as their main database to know where there's invasive species, and also a lot of our partners do in the network of invasive species management throughout New York State. Uh, the New York IMAP Invasive Species Program is hosted by the New York Natural Heritage Program. They're the staff that are actually working on it, doing the updates and troubleshooting and helping people to um, set up accounts and the trainings. So those are the people that we refer to in the Heritage Program. So if you look at the graph on the left here, just to give you a little background about IMAP invasives, originally a lot of the records we would collect information during the season, upload it at the end of the season. And over time, an app was invented, and people started using it, and you can see the dark green there in about 2017. It starts to expand, and more people are using the app as opposed to the other methods. So we're getting a lot of the records are coming to us in real time. Um, and then for each record, the species is confirmed by someone. So it's really important that you take good photos about the characters of whatever species it is that you're looking at. And then someone is confirming that you got the species right, by looking at your photos and maybe other information that you entered in the notes. So on the right side of this slide, you can see there's a lot of partners that are involved in iMap invasives in New York State, but the most important partner is you, and because you're out there, you have the opportunity to collect this data, and we hope that you would spend a few minutes and collect this data in different parts of the Catskills that we don't get to very often. So New York IMAP Invasives website is here, newyorkimapinvasives.org. There are a lot of tutorials on this website. There's a lot of information. I would encourage you to look at their website, watch some of the tutorials as you're learning about IMAP invasives, and there's a lot of troubleshooting there. So you can log into IMAP invasives, or hit the login button. And if you have a login already, that's a username and a password, or email and a password, then you could enter it in. If you haven't used your account for a while, you could click on forgot password and enter it in. And you'll get an email, and then you could create a new password. So log in if you have an account. And then if you need to create an account, then you just start filling out this form here on the bottom, and make sure that you enter in all the information there, including your email correctly both times, and create a password. And then for the jurisdiction, you want to put New York, if you live in New York, and if that's where you're collecting this information from, because that will be where you're getting the species list that you're going to use. And so it's really important that you use the local one. When you log in, and this will happen every once in a while as they do updates, they'll give you a pop-up and give you the opportunity to clear your cache, which may help IMAP invasives to load more quickly. So if you click on the clear your cache hyperlink, then it will give you instructions to clear your cache in Google Chrome or whatever platform you might be using on the internet. So then you log into IMAP Invasives when you get an account, and uh, and first I'll draw your attention to um, the main menu in the upper left. That little thing with the lines is called a hamburger. And that's, if you click on that, then that's where you can get pull downs of other options of things that you could do in IMAP invasives. The next thing that we can point out are the navigation tools, which probably most people are familiar with from working with other maps online. And then the action tools are the ones on the top. And these, I use these a lot, especially to filter records when I want to know a certain species, Japanese barberry, where is it in the Catskills? Have we recorded it in an area that I might be going to? So that's a really important tool that I use. Identify and measure has been a good tool for me to use to figure out like what invasives might be in a certain area. Also, I should point out for this map, each of these yellow dots, kind of the size of the dot shows the number of records. So you can see there's a lot of records for IMAP invasive in the Northeast. You could use it throughout the United States or North America. but you see there's kind of big clusters of states that have in the province of Alberta that have adopted this versus some of the other states that aren't using it as much. And on the right side of this slide are the different geographic layers that you can turn on and off. Each one has a pull down. You could change the base maps to go from street view to satellite. You could turn on what prism you might be in, the boundaries of the prisms. You could turn on iNaturalist and add those records to your map. So there's lots of things that you could do with those tools. So this slide shows the data inputs and outputs for IMAP invasives. So the IMAP invasive uh, account, the database itself is in the cloud. Um, and we collect a lot of our data from the app. In the mobile app, you could collect point records, presence, or not detected. And when you're out in the field, and I'm sure all of you that are have any experience in the Catskills, we don't have a lot of connectivity in the Catskills. So luckily or fortunately, you can use IMAP invasives without having cell service. But what you want to do is when you bring your phone back to a place that has Wi-Fi, like your home, for instance, then you can upload the observations that you took into the cloud. You could also use the web interface for IMAP invasives that can do points, lines, and polygon records, presence not detected, or if you're doing treatments, you could enter those treatments that maybe you pulled a number of Japanese barberry in a place and you want to record the number that you pulled. So you could do that when you came back to your laptop and you sat down where you had Wi-Fi. But these require connectivity. So if anyone would like to go through and download the app, they can use Google Play or the App Store, and you can search for IMAP invasives. I'm going to go through how you use IMAP invasives. So if you haven't used it, you could download it and you could start using it. And then if you have questions as we go through it, then please ask and I'll try to monitor the chat if anything comes up along the way. So a really important thing before we record any observations is to know that the photos are really important. And I think I've said this 4 or 5 times already tonight, but just to stress. So if you look in the kind of upper photo here, it's the underside of a, I can tell it's a hemlock twig. The camera didn't focus or the phone didn't focus on the twig itself because it looks like this person was trying to take a picture of hemlock woolly adelgid, which are these white cottony masses underneath the twig of the hemlock. I can make it out on the upper photo, but then the lower photo, maybe on the very tip of this hemlock twig, there's hemlock woolly adelgid, but not quite sure. So it's really important that you take good photos. So it's important that you know what characters that you're looking for. And you need to be focused and close up enough to be able to take a good photo. And what you might want to do, a really good hack that we use a lot is to get the camera to focus a little better. I'll put a clipboard with a blank piece of paper behind the twig or whatever I might be taking a picture of, and the camera will focus on it better. Sometimes it will be helpful. You can use your hand in the same way to put it behind whatever it is you're trying to take a picture of. So that's a really important thing to try to do is take good photos. And what we would really want here is to be able to focus on the hemlock woolly adelgid when you send in or upload an observation of hemlock woolly adelgid, then somebody's going to look at it and they're going to try to verify whether that's hemlock woolly adelgid or not. And like I said, if the photo's not good, they may not be able to identify it. So that's the first step, is to set up the account and the app. And that requires connectivity. But when you're recording invasive species, that doesn't require connectivity. But then when you upload the IMAP records, then you need connectivity again. So you want to, when you set up your account, you want to sign into the app before you go out in the field. In case you don't have service out in the field, actual recording of the invasive species, as I said, doesn't require a connection, but uploading to iMaps will. Oh, Tammy, do you want to unmute yourself? I see you have a question. How do you find your current location?
Yeah, when you go on the, computer, you know, you see the whole United States.
Yep.
Um, and how do you, like, when I'm on my mobile app, it knows, well, no, I guess you don't see that a whole map. How do you zone into where you are when you're trying to look for records?
Oh, so you could, there is a place on the upper left, I should have pointed it out, of the screen where you could enter in a location, like it could be a town name, and the map will zoom into that. Or you could just keep magnifying the map until you zoom into New York State or the Catskills or whatever region you might be interested in.
But
Um,
it doesn't seem to have slider bars where you can like center it to the East Coast and as you're blowing it up. And I mean, I
oh,
use
yeah,
the
yeah.
mobile app in the field, but when I try and look for something, do you know what I mean? Like there's not
Yeah,
slider
so you
bars.
have to pan over to get to it. Yeah.
What do you
Um,
mean by pan over, like with you're on a mouse wheel or?
yeah, so you would want to like click on the map and just kind of grab it and pan over to get to the place that you would want to go.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I hope that's helpful.
Yep.
Um, thanks for the question. So getting back to the setup, when you come into IMAP Invasives, the IMAP Invasives app, this is what the screen's going to look like. It's going to be blank. You're going to have the main menu up here in the upper left. And when you're setting it up, you want to click on Preferences. And then you have these different parts of the menu that you need to go through. Blowing up the upper part of this long column on the left-hand side. You chose New York as your jurisdiction. It has your email address, or you need to type in your email address and password the same as your online account. If you have trouble, it might be that you typed it in wrong if you get an error message. So you want to double check that you have the correct email and password that you used in setting up your account. So then you click on Retrieve IMAP Lists, and you should get this message that says your IMAP data was retrieved successfully, which includes your species, project, and organization lists. Then you hit OK. Then you have these options in the next section of the preferences. It's optional to change these. I usually just stick with the default. Yes, if you're really into scientific names, you could change it to scientific names. I use common names. I think I have my picture quality set at 50%. You could have it save photos taken with this app to your photo library, which I find I like because then I can find the photos. Sometimes I want to find a photo of a certain species and use it in a PowerPoint. I would use the roads as the default base map. Satellite uses more data, so in limited data areas, then I I suggest using the satellites. Oh, I forgot that there's a number of clicks that I need to do here. Sorry. So you can set up a customized species list, and if you're doing this right now, you're doing the training. You could click on a fake species for testing, and we could do an observation of that. But you could select a number of species. If you wanted to, for instance, only record the species that the 7, 8 species that we went over tonight, then you could just add them in this list. So you don't have to look through the 250 invasive species in New York State, but you just really want to concentrate on the ones that you know or that you're interested in or that you might be working on for a certain project. Yep, we already went over that, the defaults. Then preferences, you want to make sure you save it. It's really important that you hit the save button, that you have things the way that you want it, and then don't forget to hit the save button because it'll go back to defaults if you didn't hit the save button. So then we could record an observation here. And as I mentioned, connectivity isn't required. To do an observation, you're back on this screen on the phone. In the upper right, there's this green bar that says Add Observation. You click on that, and you could select a fake species if you're doing the training right now. IMAP Invasives asks us to have people do a fake species so that they know that we're training people. So if anybody is following along, they've downloaded IMAP Invasives, they've set up their accounts, and then if you are adding an observation, you could do a fake species. You could take a picture or not. And you can, with IMAP Invasives, you can take a photo with the camera, or if you have a photo in your library, you could use that photo from your library. And IMAP Invasives will pull the location and the date metadata from the photo. But your camera has to be set up to capture metadata, and the appropriate permissions are required to give IMAP Invasives access to that information. You could enable your custom species list, or if you wanted to have a list of all the species, invasive species in New York State, you could turn that off, but right now we'll turn that on. And you could select a fake species. Then you can select detected or not detected. It doesn't really matter if it's a fake species. Then on the map, you should see your location, and you should also see that there's latitude and longitude coordinates on the box below. So in order to see those, you have to make sure your GPS is enabled on your phone. Then you could add comments if you'd like. You could enter the approximate time you were searching for the invasives. This is really helpful, especially say you were looking for beech leaf disease. You hiked for 20 minutes, you didn't see it. You could say that it was not detected, or you hiked for 20 minutes and then you started to see it. So it would be really important to give us the sense of how hard did you look for it? Was it everywhere, or was it just you found it after some period of time? And then again, don't forget to save your changes, save The save button is really important. Yet you don't need to join a project, and we don't have a project set up for this specifically. So you could just enter records. Other prisms have different projects set up. We don't really have specific active projects for CRISP, so any record is good record. Thanks, Tammy. So then the next step, you've gone through 2 out of the 3 steps. The next one, you require connectivity, so you come back home with your phone, and you need a connection to upload your records. So this is your fake species record. There'll be a box to the right side of that record. If you did multiple species or multiple observations, I should say, then you would have a number of yellow boxes here. And you would want to check that box and then go to the main menu in the upper left, the hamburger. Then you could upload selected and give it a few. Well, first it will give you a pop-up, I guess. Are you sure you want to upload 1 records? And you hit OK. Then give it a few minutes and it should upload. So then you could go online and in the iMaps database, you could look at your record where it compares to other records of any species, or if it's your fake species, it wouldn't really matter that much. But I hope that that was useful. I don't know, did people actually download IMAP invasives and try to do a fake record? Let me know how that went. If anybody has any questions right now, I'm happy to answer them. And you can unmute yourself. Feel free. This is our contact information too. Was it Claudia was going to send me a picture, so feel free if you have any questions about iMaps, if there's things that are going on, I could help you. Alexa would be more than willing to help you, I'm sure. This is her contact information. Again, she's our volunteer and outreach coordinator. We we post all of our events to catskillinvasives.org, our website, and we also post them. I post them to Facebook, so you can see what's coming up in the future. We have a lot of trainings that we're doing, both virtually and in person. So you're welcome to come to any of our trainings either way, and we're always happy to see folks. And I'd be happy to hear how you guys are doing with IMAP invasives. And if you are uploading records, I'll see them. And I'm really thankful for everyone that does take the time to do that. Does anyone have any questions?
I was just going to say any of the Catskill maintainers who are having trouble with IMAP invasives can contact me, and I'm just putting my email in the chat.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Charlie. Oh, Kat, looks like you uploaded a fake record. It worked okay?
Yeah, I haven't gotten to look at it yet. But the process looks like it went fine.
Awesome. Thank you. Did people have other questions? Also, I recorded this if you want to take the time, I guess, to listen to it again, watch it again. We'll post it online on our website, the catskillinvasives.org. And you're welcome to look at it, or if there are people that you know that weren't able to make it tonight, we want the information to be available so they could always watch it there. And then, like I said, the second part of this, we'll go over some of these same species and also learn about management. So I hope that this is kind of a helpful first step to get people going with some of these species, learning to identify them, and also learning IMAP invasives. Anybody have any questions or
Oh, yep, I see my upload on the map now. It's pretty cool.
Excellent. Thank you, Kat.
Thanks.
Great.
Thanks a lot for doing this presentation for us.
Yeah, and thanks, Charlie. Charlie was actually the inspiration to do this. So thank you for asking me to do it, and really happy to do it. Hopefully we can do. I'm expecting that we'll be able to do more trainings in the future. Like I said, we'll have the one that will focus on management in the September. Then maybe next year we could go over some of these same species or new species as we're collecting more information in the field. Train some more people to go out there and collect information. We might want to collect a little bit different information next year, depending on what we're finding on the trails this year. So I really appreciate you reaching out to me, Charlie, to get this going, and I appreciate everybody that's been listening in tonight. I know that your time's valuable, and I really appreciate you listening tonight, and also really hopeful to see your records in the future. That you can collect some iMaps records anywhere in CRISP, any species, and I'll be really happy to see them. So unless anybody else has any other questions or comments, I could let you go. Anything else? Thanks again for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. Hope everybody has a good night. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.